Well, hello, my friend. Welcome back to another episode of the From Chaos to Peace podcast, where I talk about how clutter is so much more than you think, and we put a spiritual twist on clearing that clutter to get organized. Thank you so much for allowing me back into your ears. Well, hello, my friend. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Conny Graf. I hope you're doing well, and thank you so much for spending some time with me in your ear. So last week, I left you hanging. Not very nice of me, right? I told you that not your fear, not your logical reasons, and also not your unique circumstances are actually what's stopping you from clearing your chaos and from getting organized. Because if those were the real reasons, no one would ever make any progress, because we all have fears, reasons, and unique circumstances. And yet, some people, a lot of people actually, still make progress. They start decluttering, they start getting organized, they start making a difference. So what then, you wonder probably, is actually keeping you stuck? Well, the real culprit behind all of that chaos, all of the digital, physical, mental, emotional, and financial clutter is, well, it all comes down to unmade decisions. Yes, clutter is just a graveyard of unmade decisions. And today I want to dive into what that means and, more importantly, how you can break free from it. So let's face it again. Let's say it again. Before anyone does anything, before anyone changes anything in their life and business, they have most likely fear. They do have lots of reasons why not to do it, and they also have a unique set of circumstances. Yet they still do it. They still start the journey to make progress. So how can that be? Well, the answer is, again, that it's not the fear, the reason, and the circumstances that stops us. It's not making decisions. And not making decisions can become a habit. And with this habit, we create this graveyard of unmade decisions. It's a hesitation to decide, and it then shows up everywhere. Don't just in your physical clutter, it also shows up in your paper clutter, digital clutter, mental clutter, emotional clutter, social clutter, and also financial clutter. In every area, if you have clutter and chaos, it's because of unmade decisions. And the more you have that habit of not making decisions, the bigger that graveyard becomes, the more overwhelming it becomes, right? Not making a conscious and intentional decision to postpone this decision and to procrastinate on things and on tasks. It's like pushing a big wave in front of you, either in physical form, in your home or office, in form of physical clutter, or it's in your papers, like real papers or digital files, emails, photos, also in your finances with expenses and things that you really don't need and buy anyways. But now, not everyone acts the same or out of the same reasons why they don't make a decision. So it plays out differently for different types of people. And if you're listening for this podcast for a while, you know I talk a lot about the dominant element in us. What kind of type of person we are. Are we a fire type, an earth type, an air type, or a water type? And each one of these types struggles a little bit differently with the decision making. So I'll give you some examples. If you're a fire type, you might avoid making decisions because you tell yourself you need inspiration and motivation. And if it doesn't feel exciting, you delay the decision and the action. And you're often avoiding decisions then by jumping into new distractions, like shiny objects, right? Instead of sitting in the discomfort of having to make a decision. So an example would be, I don't feel motivated, so I'll start something new instead of dealing with my unfinished project, right? Maybe you recognize yourself in that. I have a lot of fire in my chart. I sure can see myself in this. If I'm not very careful, I step into this trap. Now, if you're an earth type, it's a little bit different because you might feel you need a solid plan first. And without a plan, you can't move forward. So you avoid the decisions by over-researching and over-planning, right? You insist that you need the perfect plan first, and it has to be step by step to the minutest decision. Everything has to be planned out first before you can take any action, or before you can make a decision even to take action. So an example would be, I can't declutter my office until I have the perfect paper filing system in place and I know exactly how to file it, or until I know exactly what goes where. Even though you can't, maybe you have to just start it and it will unfold, it will show itself where the things need to go while you're doing it. But this is really hard for the earth type. Now, if you're an air type, you might feel like you don't have enough time or enough information to decide. So you either keep pushing things off, or you avoid making decisions by staying in this overthinking and second guessing and driving yourself nuts. I can definitely attest to that. I have done that time and time again. So an example would be, I have so many options. What if I make the wrong decision? I better wait until I'm 100% sure that what I would pick now is the right decision. But can we really know 100%? I don't think so. Somebody once said that if we're more than 51% sure, we should go for it. I forgot who that was. But we could also think if we're 80% sure it's the right decision, we go for it. The 80-20 rule, right? Just being mindful of getting into this trap of overthinking and second guessing and paralysis. That's the air type, right? And lastly, then we have the water type. And as a water type, you might get overwhelmed by the emotional weight of having to make decisions. So you avoid them to prevent stress. Although the big pile of all these unmade decisions is also very heavy and also overwhelms you. So you avoid making decisions by getting lost in emotions and not wanting to deal with discomfort. But you are actually dealing with discomfort, the discomfort of unmade decisions. So maybe it would be easier to deal with the uncomfortable or with the discomfort of having made a decision that maybe later turns out to be not 100% the right decision. But the water type often says, this item brings back emotions, so I can't let it go. So I leave it in my place, even though I really want to declutter and I'm really overwhelmed with everything, but I can't let anything go because, and so it goes. And again, the twist, of course, is that by avoiding to make real decisions, and with real decision, I mean conscious real decisions, you kind of still make a decision. It's just an unconscious one. It's an unconscious decision where you give your power away to those things, to those excuses, to the procrastination, to the circumstances. It's not having too much to do that stops you. It's the unconscious decision to not make a decision that stops you. And it's also not the fear of failing or the fear of regret that stops you. It's the unconscious decision to allow that fear of regret stopping you and letting you procrastinate and making your life easier. And it's not the bad timing that stops you. It's again the unconscious decision that the timing is off and it's bad timing that stops you. So if you think of it like this, what is really stopping you from doing what you want to do? Nothing really, other than your excuses why you don't want to make a decision, right? And then the chaos, the physical, digital, financial clutter all stems from this mental clutter of not wanting to make a conscious, intentional decision, which then leads to emotional clutter in form of suppressed feelings, stress, more overwhelm, anxiety, all because we're not willing to make a decision. And the longer we wait, and I include myself in this, right? So I'm not preaching to you, I'm talking to myself as well. The longer we wait with making a decision, the bigger the pressure gets and the more unmade decisions are piling up in front of us. That's also where all this overwhelm is coming from. And I said it earlier, not making a decision is a decision. And to leave it for another day. We just push everything into the future, into some undefined better time when we think we will be more equipped to dealing with making a decision or to dealing with the chaos or to deal with the clutter. But that time actually never comes. For most of us, it never comes. And in the meanwhile, we suffer from the stress and overwhelm of that chaos. And what happens also, instead of that this better time that we imagine is going to be here in the future, so not only is this not coming, what happens instead is often some sort of emergency where something or someone from the outside forces us to make a decision. And often at the most inconvenient time when we're already in a time crunch, when we're already stressed out, then that gets put on top of it. And it becomes almost unbearable. And why is this? Like, why is the brain doing this? Why are we doing this to ourselves? Well, the brain is in a way wired that way. I talked about this podcast before about the motivational triad. You can listen to episode 87 and 162 where I talked about this. This not wanting to make a decision happens because our brain seeks A, pleasure, B, wants to avoid pain, and C, wants to be efficient. It doesn't think of you in the future. It only thinks of you right now. To our brain, making a decision right now is the opposite of being pleasurable. It's very painful, and it needs a lot of energy. And it in the brain's view, it's not efficient. And that's why it's so easy to procrastinate on all these things and to procrastinate on making a decision. But what our brain, and therefore we, when we fall for it, don't realize is that all these unmade decisions also cost a lot of energy. Often more energy than making a decision actually would cost, right? So the brain's objection of seeking pleasure, wanting to avoid pain, and wanting to be efficient are actually not fulfilled, right? It's on the opposite. It's getting worse and worse the other way. All these unmade decisions, they push us down and make us really feel heavy. And it feels like a big boulder to push through the day, because soon enough you come across something that you would need to make a decision on, but you can't because of something else you haven't decided yet. And until you have decided on that one, you can't decide on this one. And so you push both into the future, and the boulder or the wave or whatever metaphor you want to use gets bigger and bigger and heavier, and life gets more stressful and more stressful. And like I said, not making a conscious decision can become, and often is, such an automatic habit that you're not even realizing it. And it also makes it very hard, or even harder, to break this automatic habit. But what we need to realize is that this habit is not helpful and it is not serving us. Now, another issue, maybe why we have such a hard time to make a decision and breaking out of this habit, is also because we haven't learned how to make a decision and then having our own back after we made that decision. Meaning not beating ourselves up if things don't go exactly as planned. We have this bully in our head that then beats us up for making the wrong decision, possibly, right? And so that's where a lot of that fear stems from, that we think keeps us from making a decision, because we haven't learned to have our back, to understand that we always give our best and we always make the best decision with what we know and feel in the moment, and that we don't have to beat ourselves up after the fact to quote unquote making a wrong decision, right? So again, unconsciously we decide it's too hard and we just keep the stuff. We just don't clean up. We just don't get organized. We don't cancel that subscription we don't need. We don't create a supportive environment. We just soldier on. We just deal with the circumstances. We just tolerate how it is, and we drag ourselves through the day. And this is how clutter accumulates and starts filling your home, starts filling your office, starts filling up your space on your computer, on your phone, in your brain also, right? All these unmade decisions clutter up your brain because they're not gone. You can't check them off because they're still lingering here as unmade decisions. And this creates a lot of heavy emotions that are in your heart. And then there is that funny situation when you're actually forced to make a decision in whatever circumstance, right? Something that you procrastinated and you finally have to make a decision because that outside force or circumstance comes and demands a decision. And then you make the decision and then you're like, why did I use so much energy procrastinating? Why did I use that much time and energy to not make a decision when actually the fact and the act of making that decision was not even that bad? And it's only uncomfortable for a little short while, and then it feels so much lighter instead of carrying around this huge backpack full of unmade decisions or pushing that boulder forward of unmade decisions that I talked earlier. And I don't know, I'm sure you can look back to and where you didn't make a decision for the longest time, and then finally you made one and you were so relieved and you were so questioning yourself, why the heck did I not make this decision earlier? So with all this insight and me being on this soapbox of talking about it, and again, I talk to myself too, right? Like, I'm not any better. I have to be careful too that I don't fall into the fire type of, oh, I'm not motivated to do it, or I don't fall into the air type, oh, I don't have enough information or I don't have enough time or whatever. The more we start consciously making decisions and we start with small decision, we can dig ourselves out of this hole. And it may take a little while, but the more decisions we're making and the more we're getting into the habit, especially the small decisions, to make them right away and get them off the plate, the better we will feel about it. And this is also, again, where a few minutes a day keeps the chaos away comes in. Because it trains our decluttering muscle and at the same time our decision-making muscle. So if you follow my 3 principles from episode 253, that means you would start with first a small manageable chunk. So in terms of decision-making, that means start making decisions on small things that don't have huge consequences. If you are worried of making a wrong decision and regretting it later, right? Start small, but get into the habit of making decisions and not pushing the decisions into the foreseeable future. Then step 2 is start with the least personal area. Again, that's with decision making. It's areas that don't matter that much, that are not life altering right away, right? We will have to make those eventually, but let's start with all the easy ones first. And 3, get into the habit of making these decisions every single day. Maybe even start taking stock in every night, how many decisions have I actually made, or give yourself a challenge of making 5 decisions today. And again, not postponing them, especially not the ones that are easy and future decisions may rely on this decision to make. And only if you come across a decision that you can't make because of a previous decision that you haven't made yet, start cleaning that up too and start making those decisions. And start, again, getting into the habit of not just unconsciously make the decision, because that is a decision too. It's a decision to keep your chaos, to keep your clutter, to stay in the overwhelm and to stay into the overthinking. So by intentionally making decisions, realizing that any unmade decision becomes clutter, mental clutter, then emotional clutter. Often it shows itself as physical and digital and financial clutter in the outside world. By making decisions on an ongoing basis, you can move so much better from chaos to peace. Okay, my friend, that was it for this week. Thanks so much for listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate you. See you next time. Take good care and be safe.